Hi, I'm back from a prolonged illness, and unfortunately now I'm getting normal person sick, as you can no doubt hear from my voice, but I'm going to record this anyway. I hope I'm understandable, and let's plow ahead. We'll start with some questions, and then the Wapaka 2020 tournament report, where I went 4-1 with Boulderhead. Question: is there a way for me to play OBR and not be that guy? To me, you can play any sort of OBR army and not be that guy. The army is strong, but ultimately fine. But you can't expect the majority to be so reasonable. The best thing to do when dealing with bandwagon complainers is zero in on the buzzwords. Remember, in most cases they don't actually know anything, they just don't like certain words the people online told them are bad, and they've never actually played against it at all. People always say Petrifex, and so that's the word you want to avoid in your army list. Might I suggest Mortis Praetorians with Xantos, Bone Shaper, and Catacross. You can collect most of the bonuses that Petrifex gets through some other means, though with a bit more effort, and it's overall a better sub-faction when running on all cylinders. Question: is there any validity to running units of 10 thralls so that you can get them all in, or are they too fragile then? I think they're too fragile in any number, 10, 20, or 30. A 5-up save with no ward means that they're just dead or fleeing if attacked by anything real. Low Tide or Abyssal Darkness can help, but are limited or random. And you aren't taking AD as a spell generally in any case. And a situational 4-up cover save just doesn't save them. What really kills them is being on 32mm bases and only 1-inch reach, despite them all having long two-handed weapons in the sculpts. This means that you don't get any benefit from running more than 10, since only about 10 can ever pile in. 20 will die just about as easily as 10, and playing with 30 means that either they still all die against true hammers, or you get to keep 10 if you inspire presence, and then you just paid 360 points to attack with 130 points worth of them once, and then the last 10 die. Not a great return. Better to play 10s and just cut your losses if charged. In conclusion, you're right, 10s are the way to go. For IDK 2 at some point down the road, I hope they expand on the great idea of Soul Scryers acting like LON heroes to regen slain Namarti models, but put enough armor or avoidance on them so that there are ever any alive to bring back after Battle Shock. Question: wow, I was gonna buy into Maw Tribes, but not anymore. Just as deadly, lol. Is the book really that bad? Yes, but you should still play them. If you'd asked, is the army really that bad, I'd say no, not really, with a very specific list or two, but the book itself is trash. While many of my critiques have been power level based or adjacent, my main complaints haven't been. Their overall stats are quite poor, but strong players can do well sometimes, which is a common theme for many armies. Like a ladder with 4 wheels attached to it and an engine racing down the hill, it's currently coasting on monster capturing and charge damage alone. The book is just clearly a half-finished rush job, and the playstyle suffers for it. Many of the abilities in there had a good starting point, but weren't followed through on. Like Bites doing nothing, Mawpot D3 heal, but the refill mechanic is not controllable, and so is essentially just a once per game with no build around me fun, and needs a hero babysitter. Hungry and Eating keyworded, but then nothing consequential calls back to them. War Scrolls were straight up half updated. Your artifacts, traits, and prayers are like a big bag of chips, and you open them and find out it's just air with 2 crumbs at the bottom. Most of your War Scrolls are weak on their own and seem designed to need a subfaction to make them playable, but then the subfactions are half-baked and out of touch with each other and the rest of the game, and only 2 of them are okay. If I could boil it down, I'd say failure to follow through on mechanics. It's just unfinished. Like, what's the core mechanic of Maw Tribes? What are you doing exactly, besides moving up and trying to charge people, which is what everyone's trying to do? Mechanically, you aren't placing shipwrecks and playing to the tides, or controlling the Wheel of Corruption, or casting spells to get points to summon, or planning ahead to place grave sites and then maneuvering near them to bring full units back to life, or building a network of wildwoods to teleport between, or counting slain units to get blood tickets to spend on Chuck E. Cheese prizes, or setting up combos of supercharged endless spells, or getting alternative inside-out command points to stimpack your dudes, or blazing runes for on-demand army-wide bonuses, or positioning Strike's last bubbles and getting your money back whenever your heroes die, or deep striking your best dudes, or moving and fighting out of sync, or healing and regenerating tons of cannibals, and so on. You know what I mean? Maw Tribes hope their buffs land and then try to charge people. In Boulderhead you don't even have buffs, you just charge. Might Makes Right essentially lets you capture objectives at all, which in AOS is pretty ubiquitous anyway, right? In other words, the book is starving for meaningful mechanics to build and play around. Keep in mind my review was heavily themed in then versus now, and my expectations were high after reading, well, almost every other new book that came out that year. I mean, they kind of knocked it out of the park with all of them, and then Maw Tribes. Also, I want to put a pin on this next concept. Power level is not intrinsically linked with being a good book, in my opinion. There are books that I consider failures that still have a very strong list or two in them competitively. For instance, Corn. On design, I consider New Blades of Corn to be downright awful, and a true failure of bringing rules in line with the look and feel of the models and lore. Like, why are your foot heroes obliged to cower behind their troops in tedious Venn diagram wholly within buff zones? Corn heroes should want to sprint into combat and smash, even the foot versions, and toss retinues of pathetic coattail riding hopefuls aside to take wounds for them. Their war scrolls should support that, but they do not. Thematically, the army should be the most run up and smash next to Ironjaws, but their rules oblige them to play like fiddly, meticulous tape measure circle chess. Why do you lose all your blood tithe when you spend some? Corn isn't the stingy moneylender god, he's the god of bloodshed. Corn cares not from whence the blood flows, but when you're spending it, suddenly he turns into my insurance company? Why did Wrathmongers lose the most fun ability in the game? Why is the second most new player targeted faction so hard to play and build lists for? Why do big units give you bonuses but Blood Tithe wants you to be MSU? I'm all for the push and pull of alternative options, but your battle traits should generally not step on your other rules' toes, anyway. Question: any idea where you would place Maw tribes on a tier list yet, or too soon to say? Let me get my tier caveats out of the way quick. I haven't talked about them in a while. In casual play with equal skill and decent lists for almost any two AOS armies, the one that's better on the battle plan you happen to be playing on should win. Otherwise, flip 3 coins and there you go. Does Maw tribes bring ogres up to flip some coins and win in a casual setting? Yes. Are they decent on most battle plans? They're okay. If you're on YouTube battle report level of let's just roll some dice and push our guys around, Maw tribes will get you the win just as often as anyone else in the fat middle. As a big damage countercharge style army where every unit is basically the same, Maw tribes actually gets a bump in performance against opponents who just run up and hope the dice roll their way, possibly even more so than normal, since all of their units hit hard. It might struggle if you and your friends are gamers and try to play optimally even in casual matched play like us, but I think they'll lose their well-deserved hot garbage stigma moving forward. That being said, people still thought Thundertusks were overpowered even after 3 years of them being competitively trash, so who knows, sometimes first impressions are hard to shake. Now that that's out of the way, you're probably right, it's too early to do that, especially before we collect enough data to matter, but what kind of AOS YouTube opinion man would I be if I didn't indulge a little? I have a bit of experience here as well, as last season 2 of my large tournament results were tied for the best record BCR got in AOS 2.5 from LLV statistics, though that's less impressive when you consider that they were both only 3 and 2. But as a faction that got 0, 4, and 1s or better worldwide on events big enough for the stats page, that's what it means to suck, so what do you want? They're better now, and someone's already grabbed a 4 and 1 with the new book as of December, and last week Just Play Ian took 4th at a heat, and I went 4 and 1 last week at Wapaka, with full secondaries, an important note, since most secondaries used to be all but impossible for BCR to manage. They're way better than they used to be. This is my 2020 tier list for AOS currently. You'll note that there are no longer any armies in the okay, weak, or shit tier category except for Tamarkan's Horde. And I did this on purpose to show just how far we've come. There just almost aren't any armies in the game anymore that actually suck. Like, everyone's good, it's just the water level has risen. And I put this in there as context. And this one finally sheds the excess weight of overall game win % statistic, as I've come to think that it simply muddies the water. While percentage of the field is a very useful data when tooling up your list and thinking about how likely you are to play against a given faction, as you move along in rounds, the better factions rise to the top anyway, and hence get more likely to play against, making that consideration more of a first 2 rounds sort of tidbit, and honestly, a holdover from Magic the Gathering tiers, and I just need to extricate them from AOS because it's a different system. Very popular factions that large numbers of players bring and lose with are pulled down from where the good lists and pilots can bring them to. Does a person looking at a tier list really care that the majority of Khorne and Stormcast lists lose, when what they actually want to know is how good is this army really? How good can I be with this army if I really put in the time to get good? How hard is this army to beat if my opponent is good, like I play him round 4 or 5? I think that's actually more useful information. And looking at a faction like Khorne, with hovering around a 50% win rate, if you play them round 5 in the undefeated bracket, they're simply better than that stat makes them look. This of course means that my tiers are even more opinion-based, but the raw stats are there if you want them, even if they are self-reported and hence don't have the confidence level we might like. Also, one more note, The battle plan you happen to be playing your game on is so hugely important that you could almost make an army tier list for every battle plan. Literally, and it would be arguably just as useful as army tiers or matchup tiers. Perhaps more so. OBR and Fireslayers are quite good, but they might be tier 4 on 8 objective battle plans. The shit matters. New armies enter the fray here with Tzeentch 2.0 uncontroversially leaping all the way up to needs nerfs immediately S tier. Who could have seen that one coming? Tzeentch 2 is probably going to be ridiculous. Change Host was so obviously a problem in first edition, I'm surprised they straight up buffed it for the new book, especially when making other historically complained about things way worse in other new books. Like Sylvaneth abilities getting nerfed, and same with their battalions, and Thunder Tusks from BCR, even though they were never great, etc. One of the most historically complained about battalions ever, which is Change Host. It's fine. It's fine. Let's make it better. So there's been a lot of Twitter drama and responses to the domination and negative play experiences, but I'm with 2+ Tough on this one. The reaction to this has been pretty disappointing, I think, with talk of comp and player-led bannings, both irredeemably horrid ideas. Go find a tournament at some random out-of-the-way store and click on their tournament pack. If the TO is trying to comp and fix stuff with the game in a big house rules section, I guarantee you're in for solid gold comedy. Meph and I have seen a few of them and just laughed for an hour about Monster Limit 2 at 2K, Eroticus band of all things. No more than 2 of any one war scroll, even for Battle Line. Yes, which makes some armies literally unplayable, but this is how little thought goes into this stuff. Whenever a unit deep strikes or teleports, it takes D6 mortal wounds. Yes, this is real. And other complete nonsense. Remember Mark Rosewater, players are great at finding problems, but terrible at finding solutions. Player-led bannings and comp is never the answer, especially when it comes to problematic factions. Do you ban the battalion, or the faction, or a unit, or complain to Games Workshop, have them fix it, and move on? But enough on comp. The reactions were throwing insults and blame every which way, often landing on specific people by name, which you know I don't like. Designers are at fault, playtesters are at fault, blah blah blah, no. Remember my flowchart reaction to the Sam and Jervis meme where I talked about the actual solution. It's just as Vince correctly pointed out, and he knows a thing or two about the pipeline of game development. He does it for a living. I'll let Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft, handle this one. Take it away, Steve.
Developers, 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 developers. Developers, 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 developers. Yes!
Specifically ones that play the game, ideally at a high level, and have a deep knowledge of not just the AOS metagame, but also metagames in general and game theory. With a knowledge base in very high level play, you can find someone who also has care and consideration for casual play. But if you only have people who play extremely casually, if much at all, their balancing will be throwing darts with a blindfold competitively, which often trickles down to toxicity, especially in casual games. I'm not overly concerned about top-table competitors. They can deal with it. They can even deal with the preposterous NPE like new Tzeentch or pre-nerf Slaanesh. They either tweak a list to beat it, or play it and win, practice the mirror matches, or take one loss at the next event. I'm not worried about them. But when Timmy picked up the new Slaanesh book when it came out and just filled it with his coolest heroes, his friends quit the game, and so did he. The new OBR faction comes in, for me, at a little under Fireslayers, whom they greatly emulate as far as playstyle is concerned. A super defense army with high damage, but are slow, and can struggle on objective play. Fireslayers have deep strike and better guys, OBR has better heroes, and your choice of regen or catapults. Slayers, however, remains a doggedly unpopular army as they're expensive to buy and all their guys look the same. OBR, on the other hand, are stylin' and popular. A lot of people will play them, and they're good against opponents who don't play well to battle plans. So I expect their win percent to briefly inflate before they settle, as I said when they came out. As 2+ Tough also famously said when they come out, and as is already happening. Sometimes the meta really can adapt. I know the meta can adapt is kind of a meme, but sometimes it's true. To be perfectly honest, they've accrued, in my opinion, somewhat of an undeserved boogeyman status online. Even with the first reveals, I had no idea what the alarmists were smoking. It seemed like a strong but slow-ass army with good armor. Free shrugs. If you haven't figured out that speeding to objectives and playing with high rand or mortal wounds is good, then maybe this time it'll sink in. It's not a crime to be great. and great is a far cry from overpowered. As for Maw tribes, I've decided to keep them split, as the two ways you can build the two armies that got lazily duct taped together in the new battle tome are distinct enough to remain separate for tiers. Formerly, Gutbusters and BCR both sat at the very bottom of D tier, which is equivalent to tier 6 in this newest tier list. A place where going 4-1 even once was a pipe dream, and things have clearly improved. Maw Tribe's Gutbusters of various flavors, but mostly comprised of blood-gullet gourmands with one other thing to taste, rise all the way up to the top of good tier, aka tier 4, which would be the 3 and 2 tier. Low drop 4 Stonehorn Beastclaw Raiders has surprising game exactly half the time, good luck on those turn 2 priority rolls, and dodge your unwinnable horde matchups, so I've tentatively placed them in the very strong tier 2. As a well-known proponent of all things Stonehorn, I played them throughout their entire tenure as one of the worst armies in the game, so understand that perhaps I'm being a bit overzealous here and maybe take this one with a grain of salt. It's still early and ever more preposterous armies keep coming out. When the coin flip fails or is not applicable to the opponent's army or the battle plan, they're probably right next to Gutbusters, as are any non-hyper-tuned BCR lists. But you have got to respect the alpha now. I expect to see BCR slip down to mid-great tier, like tier 3-ish, when opponent unfamiliarity with the matchup wears off. Question Eurobad with an E or Yorobad with a J? Depends. E-Bad is fun because it helps Beast Riders and Mournfang do damage in combats they haven't charged into. Movement is king, however, and especially with Alpha Pin, Foam Vomit armies creeping into the meta, you really need to fan out ASAP. And so you have to take the hit on damage and go J-Bad. Your strength is getting huge charges right away and going for the double turn, and so the extra d6 helps your main strategy, and indeed getting other places when you aren't on that main strat, even if it doesn't apply to your Frost Lords, which is a mark against, and only turn 1, which is another mark against. But it's cheaper. Question, so why didn't you play J-Bad at Wapaka last weekend? Because I wasn't finished painting that version, and they weren't using the new Tzeentch rules yet. Also, I didn't know about the secret trick that Just Play Ian discovered, as far as I know, with J-Bad. Since it gives you specifically a d6, quote, move in the hero phase, and not a d6, quote, normal move in the hero phase, you can use this movement to retreat from an opponent's alpha strike. Only it's not technically a retreat, since a retreat specifically only happens during a, quote, normal move. A move has no restrictions on proximity to enemy models, and what stops you from charging later in the same turn is if you have, quote, retreated. Thus, if you get alpha struck on turn 1 before you go, you can then move d6 out of combat that isn't a retreat, then charge in and blow them up. Maw Tribes is a new book, so no old nomenclature here, and this is fully supported by the FAQ, which specifically calls out this difference for out-of-phase movement, and is therefore not even just rules as written, but also rules as intended. 400 IQ plays. My ideal J-Bad list is pretty different, which is why I needed to paint extra stuff for it and had to switch to a more typical list for Wapaka. Also, I was very sick for the past month and a half, and so couldn't get any painting done. I wasn't even finished painting my Maw Pot, and so I just straight up didn't play with it the entire weekend, which was no big loss because it's trash. And it wouldn't have meaningfully helped in any of the matchups throughout the weekend. In fact, in round 3 against Gutbusters, his Maw Pot was actually a hindrance to him. And in the diagonal deployment plus terrain around, the only place he could put it was actually in his own way, and stopped him from getting enough guys where they needed to go in the early turns of the game. It actually hurt him in that game, and me not having one allowed me to go wherever I wanted. My J-Bad list is also much better than Ian's. You're gonna love it. All you need to do is sign up to my new HeyWoah premium content service. There's gold, platinum, and stone skeleton membership levels. I work a lot and the medical bills are piling up, and so to keep things afloat, along with YouTube ad revenue and Patreon support, I've decided to start a new monthly premium program where I'll move all the intelligent and cutting-edge information you know and love to. But as with all other premium service channels, the normal content will become vapid dogshit as I save all the good stuff for payers. And even then, after a while, even the premium stuff, Alright, Wapaka 2020 Tournament Report, 5-round tournament featuring Maw Tribe's Boulderhead, 2K. I finally did it. I finally got the elusive 4-1 with full secondaries, something I've been chasing ever since I started being in tournaments with Beastclaw Raiders. It seemed like an impossibility, and statistically it was. But then we got a new book with better rules, and suddenly I became a better player overnight. Wow, amazing, right? Oh, I suppose I should talk about my list, huh? And I suppose now's the time to drop some hot takes. Boulderhead is simply the best way to play Maw Tribes, and if you're on the Gutbuster half, my heart's out to you, it's just not as good. I'm really not used to feeling that way about anything, but I think that's the truth. Here's hoping for the GHB to fix a lot of the problems on honestly both halves of the book, but we have one good war scroll, and it's the Stonehorn, with various shit writing on top of it. And so we are able to leverage that one good war scroll with low drops to get decent performances sometimes. And that's the state of Maw Tribes competition in my opinion. So I'm on a battalion, and I think you have to be. As Beastclaw, you simply have to be low drops. You need to be able to dictate who goes first. You need to be able to go for the turn 2 double. You need to be able to choose first turn in the battle plans that you need to get heroes to camp places so that the points start snowballing before you're wiped out. You just need to dictate the flow of the game. And so you have to be on one of the two Stonehorn battalions, either Eurobad with an E or Yorlbad with a J. I chose Eurobad with an E this time because my Yorlbad with a J list was not finished painting, and I didn't think that making them go first, going for the alpha and winning the turn 2 double was going to be my plan every time, but it just was. So Eurobad with a J is straight better, and that's the end of that chapter. Just play Ian is right, especially with his tricky hero face move into getting the charge back. That changes things as well. So you have to take a Huskard, unfortunately. Which is the real problem with both of your battalions. You can't put a Frostlord in it, which is such a shame. So I took one of those, put Black Clatterhorn on him, so at least he's hitting on 3s with the good attacks, and then 2 Frostlords of both flavors. We got the Ethereal Crunchhorn to be able to just saunter up and tank stuff, but then turn around and kill it, and a Brand of the Svard Frostlord with Frosthoof Bull instead of Black Clatterhorn, so that I have the maximum amount of Ren 2 on the guy, but still hitting on 3s with the horns. Besides that, I took 3 of 2 Mornfang packs, with Culling Clubs and Prey Hackers, of course, for the extra attacks, and Iron Fists to be able to kick back some Mortal Wounds every once in a while. Number of Mortal Wounds I kicked back due to natural 6s to save with the Iron Fists on all 5 rounds, 0. But I still think it was the right choice because you just want 3 attacks per model. And I went for 3 of 2 instead of a 4-man and a 2-man, just so I can put them in more places, be able to zone stuff out, have 2 guys stand near Skaven Gnaw holes, but have an extra one still able to go somewhere and affect the game, etc. As far as Stonehorn Beast Riders and the Huskard, we go for Blood Vulture always because it's simply much better than any of your other ranged options because they always miss because it's only 1 attack and it hits on 4s still. And we're down to 3 drops. It's a shame that I couldn't find a way to get it to 2 drops, but I simply wanted 2 Frostlords and there's no 2 ways about it. With 3 drops, I was able to decide who got the first turn in 4 out of my 5 games, and if I was 2 drop, it would have been all 5, but what are you going to do? I actually got a decent amount of the 6's proc a Mortal Wound thing from Eurobad on most of my combats. I really did feel that it was useful, especially when I didn't get the charge and just needed an extra D3 damage or so that got to ignore saves. Being 1980 out of 2000 meant that I got the Triumph in 2 or 3 of the games, which is actually fair. Triumphs are definitely something you want to be going towards in a Beastclaw army. So due to getting sick again, I again apologize for my voice, but these are going to be brief, but we'll do a report anyway. Round 1, I played against Shootcast Stormcast Eternals, and it was on the Star Strike battle plan. He had a unit of 15 Paladin Protectors, big unit, and a max size unit of Long Strikes, in the subfaction that allowed him to shoot in the hero phase, so pretty strong shooting. So for deployment, my opponent didn't put anything in the Celestial Realm. I think my opponent decided to just start shooting crap early on and have enough on the ground for the full 3 layers of chaff to just start killing stuff before the objectives came down, knowing that if he put like 600 or 800 points of stuff in the Celestial Realm, I could probably table the rest of it and he couldn't just drop down and steal stuff. So not putting anything in the Celestial Realm probably looked like a mistake to the untrained eye, but I think it was probably right. So I outdropped him and let him take the first turn, knowing that I was going to absorb 2 rounds of shooting from the Long Strikes, but it probably wouldn't kill the Ethereal Stonehorn, and it didn't. Then I went and got some big charges off on his 15 Protectors and I think a unit of Judicators. Did tons of damage, got the double turn, did tons of damage, and ended up killing all 15 Protectors and I think all but maybe 1 unit of 2 Judicators by the top of turn 2. At the bottom of turn 2, he shot a Stonehorn off, got the double turn, and shot another Stonehorn off. So I double turned him and killed a bunch of stuff, he double turned me and got to kill a bunch of stuff. Objective came down in a normal place, I captured it, started scoring some points, 2 more objectives came down, and so after battle round 4, I was way ahead on points, but starting to lose all my guys. And so if I won the turn 5 priority, I would win by something like 15 points, and if I lost it, I would lose by about 2 points. And I lost it, and I lost by about 2 points. But, close game. Round 2 I played against a well-painted but fluffy Flesh Eater Quartz list on Scorched Earth battle plan, with 8 objectives. Now my opponent was very new to the game. I think he said it was like his 4th game, and he was mostly a hobbyist. And so I do what I always do in a tournament when I find myself playing against a really new player. It becomes a teaching game. I taught him how to get fucked. No, I'm kidding. It was fun for all. At points throughout, I was always talking about things I could do or interactions or, well, maybe you could do this and careful about that. And at the end, we had a little chat about lists and stuff he could do to improve his Flesh Eater Court list. All in all, I think it was pretty encouraging. But the game itself was, I deployed all my guys on this side and then just slowly walked across the table while killing everything and eventually won. Round 3 I played against Maw Tribes, but it was not a mirror match, it was a gourmand, so he was on the Gutbusters half, and his army was beautifully painted, and looked actually just really fun. Big old unit of 8 Iron Guts, no 12-man units of Gluttons, which I actually think is right. He also had a Balewind Vortex for his Butcher, which I again think is correct. I just think his army list was pretty ideal for a Gutbusters army. It's just a shame that the battle plan was knife to the heart, so I found myself very favored in this particular matchup. Monsters capturing 10 and 14 move on all of them just gives me the advantage in this matchup. I started crashing monster trucks into his guys, sacrificed a Stonehorn or 2 to the Iron Guts, who were every time they were able to reach over the top of something, or like a white blood cell, kind of anytime the Iron Guts touched anything, it died full to dead. Iron Guts are so fun. They're so fun to play with. It made me want to play with them. But come turn 3, I got priority. Oh, okay, this is the first turn where you can win the game as long as you capture it. Spend a command point to give a wounded Stonehorn 14 move again. Move 2 of them onto the point. That's 20. Captured it. Good game. Also a note for the Maw Tribes game, I rolled extremely well on all of my defensive rolls throughout the game. I don't think it affected the outcome like swinging it from a loss to a win or anything, but it did rub a little salt into the wound. Good game anyway. And in a non-bullshit battle plan, I think it's a much harder fight. Round 4 I played against Slaanesh Cyberites Battalion, on Places of Arcane Power. He was on pretty much the standard list. He got 2 Keepers plus Shalaxi, 30 Daemonettes, and then 2 5s of the Cavalry. Contorted Epitome, of course. And we were both 3 drops, so he won the roll to put down first, which means he outdropped me. He deployed heavy on the left side, and so did I, but just with most of my non-capturing chaff stuff. Put the Ethereal Stonehorn in the middle to run up and grab the center point and just kind of hold it. I had the second Frost Lord about 10 inches behind that guy to be able to countercharge anything that hits the Frost Lord off the table. And the Huskard on the far right point to just capture that one as early as possible. On Places of Arcane Power, if I don't outdrop my opponent, they'll often choose for me to go first, which I think is generally the right play. I'm much better at taking someone else off a point than I am at holding it, but if I'm supposed to hold a point that's capturable only by heroes, an Ethereal Crunchhorn pretty much is the right way to go. So anyway, he gave me first turn, I did the stuff I said, and we'll just see if Crunchhorn can weather the storm. He charged Ethereal Frostlord with 30 Daemonettes, and I was probably going to get pretty wounded but not die unless it double piles in. If 30 Daemonettes pile in twice, they will kill an Ethereal Frostlord, but not on just one. And he positioned his Epitome just a little too far away to be able to give the 30 Daemonettes double pile in because he was afraid of the countercharge, and this proved to be a mistake as it let the Frostlord live on the center point. My countercharge kills all the Daemonettes, and a whole bunch of stuff on that left side ends up almost dying, but not quite, to further delay him from swinging the trapdoor and just starting to come around on the backside. I managed to hold the points for 3 turns, which, when I won priority, allowed me to just kind of stay there and not charge anything, and so it was up to me to make a choice. If I did nothing and didn't charge, I could just collect my points and have mathematically won the game, or I could charge them and try to kill them. And if I charge these 2 keepers, the only 2 possible outcomes are still win or get myself killed and lose. So anyway, I started blasting. I charged Ethereal Frostlord into both of them, put a bunch of impact hits on Shalaxi. He fails his Locus. Beginning of combat, crunch Shalaxi, she's dead, and then kill the other keeper full to 0 to win the game anyway, in Boulder style. It was a fun game. We had a lot of banter, and it was just good stuff all around. So I'm 3-1 with full secondaries, moving into round 5, and I can kind of see over the distance the first 4-1 ever with this army, as long as I get like an underhand pitch, maybe a softball for round 5. And it's Isaiah Ramczyk on Skaven. Well shit, that's not an underhanded pitch at all, that's a fastball. But we'll see if we can do it anyway. The battle plan is Total Conquest, and he's on Skaven with Thankful and Bone Ripper, a whole bunch of Giselles, a Bell, a Warpseer, a bunch of clan rats, you know the deal. He puts 2 Gnawholes on his side and 1 on mine, so I gotta cover it, and so 2 of the 3 units of Mournfangs just sit there the whole game. I outdrop him and let him go first, because the only way I can win this game is by winning the turn 2 double, even if it means the Giselles probably kill one of the Stonehorns on turn 1. So he goes and Skitterleap fails, prompting him to have to use the Gnawhole to transport his Giselles into position, which ended up being a little too aggressive. They don't kill one of the Frost Lords. And on my turn 1, I managed to charge and get the Giselles into combat as well as 20 clan rats. And so I kill a whole bunch of them, they're still in combat. I kill a bunch of the clan rats to get rid of his bubble wrap, and then win the turn 2 double and kill a whole bunch of other crap. And so there are a lot of extra plays throughout the rest of the game that were pretty clever on both sides, but at the end of the day, that early double hit was just too punishing for him to come back into the game unless I made mistakes, and I didn't, and so there we go. 4-1, full secondaries, Beastclaw Raiders, Boulderhead, Adwapaka. What a great time. It was an awesome tournament. I had a lot of fun. I would have liked to talk about stories from the trip for about an hour, but I'm already losing my voice. So please look forward to my next show when we talk about all sorts of stuff that I promised to talk about over the winter break, but instead I was in the hospital, so. Oh yeah, props and slops. Props, 10 capturing monsters. Our monsters count as 10, and this is the only reason we are a good army in any way. It was awesome. Throughout the entire weekend, when I wanted to capture an objective, I just moved my guys towards it, and then I captured it. I know this probably sounds pretty normal for other people who are used to other armies, but as a person who's played Beastclaw for the last 4 years, I find myself in like a new dimension. Low drops. Being able to choose who went first in all but one of my games was directly responsible for giving me lines to victory in all the games that I won, and the one game that I lost. Charge damage is a big one. The impact hits, in addition to +1 damage on mount weapons when you charge, allowed Beastclaw to finally do the damage that I feel like they always should have been able to. It even allows Stonehorn Beast Riders to get lucky on the horn hits and actually do real damage instead of always disappointing no matter what. And movement. While we're no longer the 18-inch run and charge stuff that we used to be, 14 with all the other stuff is good enough. And specifically this one combos with the 10 capturing monster thing. You can very easily get to points with the Boulderhead command ability that allows you to work from the top row of your damage table to suddenly steal points with a Stonehorn who has like 9 damage on him. Slops, the Maw Pot that I didn't finish painting so I didn't even play with. I never really felt like I wanted it, and it's one thing that the once a game D3 heal is kind of minor, like it would be pretty decent on a bunch of monsters, right? But you have to have a hero really close to it to activate it, and that's just not generally feasible without giving up too much positioning in an army like Beastclaw Raiders. The Maw Pot is super half-baked for Gutbusters and almost useless for Beastclaw. They really should have thought this thing through and given it another design pass. Another slop is phases of the game. We just about don't do anything in our hero phase because all of our wizards are not worth playing and all of our priests are not worth playing. And Grasp of the Everwinter so rarely matters because last turn, if you were in combat, either your guy's dead on your turn or their guy's dead on their turn. And I believe I rolled the D3 damage for it once in 5 games. In the shooting phase, you release some vultures and then miss with harpoon launchers because they're terrible, and that's it. So really, you're just playing in the movement, charge, and combat phases, and that's about it. I know that people think you want an Unbinder, and there are some spells in your spell lores that can buff your monsters or debuff their people, but your wizards are expensive, they're terrible at dispelling, and they're terrible at casting. You don't really need the damage buffs, and they're super unreliable in any case. Plus they had another drop, and that's just the nail in the coffin. They really should have thought this through a little more. And your prayers are beyond trash attached to Thundertusk models that have terrible war scrolls. They really should have thought this through more. Another slop is Beast Riders. I found them a little disappointing throughout the day. Not quite durable enough, not quite damaging enough. They're really there for 14-inch move and 10 capturing. Everything else is just you hope to get lucky. Another slop is the fact that we're a 1 war scroll army. You're running 4 Stonehorns with various guys riding on top of them, and then everything else is just trying to get your drops down and hardly does anything. It's fun. Stonehorns were my favorite thing, and so I'm glad they're good. But man, they should have thought this through more. As always, special thanks to my patrons for keeping me alive, besides Christmas-flavored coffee. The Bearded One, Bjarni, Carl Martin Rosenberg, Carson Blake Phipps, Chaos Spawn, Charles Faduke, Chris Hallett, Chungasaurus, Daniel Oroz, Das Oxalotl, Des Brennan, Doom and Darkness, Dr. Hank, Dwight Crow, Edward Lawrence, Eric, Erda, Wanderer, Graham Seabrook, Greg Dykus, and the Sigmar and Son podcast, Ruben Marule, Heavy D6, Henners, Jacob Graham, Jens Nielsen, Jimmy Starr, Justin Hawkins, Kevin Harcum, Kyles Merchick, Marcus, Martin Orlando, Good Painter Stormcast Man, Matthew Davies, Michael Derazinski, Miguel Cabezas, Marie Gank, Nosh, Peter Atkinson, aka Plastic Crack, Perna, Richard Rossman, Rob Nelson, Steve Pegg, Tyler Emerson, Vincent Wright, Warbound, and Wendigo. Anyway, thanks for watching.